You feel that sickening cold hollowness deep in the pit of your stomach every time you hear the floorboards creak in the nursery after midnight. It's a physical chill that climbs up your spine, leaving your throat tight and your pulse drumming like a trapped bird. This hasn't just started. It's been festering for months. A heavy weight in your bones that whispers something is terribly wrong. You've tried to ignore the red flags, prayed for peace, and even checked the nursery for ghosts, but the nausea only grows. This paralyzing dread isn't your enemy. It's a messenger warning you of a betrayal you never saw coming. In the next few minutes, you will finally see what is really hidden behind that ultrasound screen. My name is Margaret Elena Vance, and at 59, I believed my legacy was finally secure within the meticulous world I built. As the founder of Vance Interior Landscapes, I have spent 30 years perfecting the art of growth. But my own soul felt like fallow ground after my husband Robert passed away 2 years ago. A sudden pulmonary embolism took him, leaving a silence in our home that I tried to fill with work. I still keep his leather gardening gloves on the potting bench, smelling of cedar and damp earth, as if he might return at any second. This unborn grandson was my second chance to finally get motherhood right and honor Robert's lasting memory. Every Sunday, I polish the family silver for a dinner my 32-year-old son Leo usually attends with a charming, practiced lateness. His wife Chloe sits beside him, appearing like a fragile maternal vessel in her flowing linen dresses. I have spent months recording messages for the baby in a leather-bound journal, pouring my hope into a legacy that felt solid and real. I am telling you this story from the garden Robert and I built together. Please let me know in the comments which city you are watching from. I need to know how far this warning travels. While names were changed, the betrayal is entirely real. This is a dramatization of my family's collapse. I was helping Chloe choose the antique moss silk for the nursery curtains last Tuesday afternoon, a day that felt heavy with the scent of fresh paint and maternal promise. As she reached up to adjust a decorative decal near the ceiling, her linen tunic rode up just enough to reveal a sliver of her taut, pale midsection. My eyes instinctively sought the linea nigra, that dark, ancient vertical line that Robert's mother always said marked the path for a new soul to follow. To my silent confusion, Chloe's skin was as flawless and unmarked as a porcelain doll's surface. I told myself she was simply blessed with resilient genetics, or perhaps using expensive concealer to maintain her perfection. The second splinter of doubt pierced my denial 2 hours later, while I was organizing the heirloom oak cradle Robert had hand-carved decades ago. Tucked beneath the mattress, I discovered a crumpled receipt dated March 12th for a return to sender on the Nonnet baby monitor Chloe claimed she was using nightly. She had spent an hour describing the crisp night vision feed and the baby's breathing, yet the paper in my hand proved the device never crossed her threshold. A cold, nameless suspicion began to root itself in my marrow, whispering that the nursery was not a sanctuary, but a meticulously constructed stage. Why would she lie about something so small, yet so vital? I spent the next 48 hours operating under a shroud of artificial calm, my CEO instincts overriding the trembling in my hands. I waited until Leo and Chloe left for their birthing class on Friday evening to slip into their guest suite with Robert's spare master key. The room smelled of lavender and deception, a scent so cloyingly sweet it made my throat tighten with a sudden, sharp nausea. I didn't look at the ultrasound photos pinned to the fridge. I knew those were ghosts. Instead, I headed straight for the small mahogany desk where Leo kept his private business ledgers and unopened mail. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird as I began my silent, methodical audit of my own son's life. My fingers moved through the files with a practiced surgical precision, looking for the invoices from St. Jude's Maternal Wellness that I had been subsidizing since January. I found the folder, but the documents inside weren't medical records at all. They were poorly disguised printouts from a generic online template. I cross-referenced the provider ID number on the top left corner against the National Medical Registry on my phone, only to find it didn't exist. My breath hitched when I realized the $5,000 monthly transfers I sent for Chloe's high-risk specialist were being routed through a shell corporation. The money wasn't supporting a life. It was disappearing into a digital void, leaving only a paper trail of absolute calculated fraud. Underneath a stack of designer baby clothes in the bottom dresser drawer, I found a plastic tub labeled industrial-grade medical polymer. I opened it, and the chemical stench of synthetic silicone hit me like a physical blow, far removed from the gentle scent of baby powder I expected. Beside it sat a specialized heating pad and several adhesive straps, the mechanical components of a life that was never meant to be born. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding or a desperate white lie. This was a theatrical production with props and a script. I stood in the center of their staged happiness, clutching a tub of cold, gray gel, realizing that my son had turned our family's future into a profitable special effect. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore, so I drove to a dimly lit diner on 4th Street to meet Marcus Thorne. Marcus is an ex-police detective who handled security for Vance Interior Landscapes for over a decade, a man who sees the world in shades of evidence and intent. He looked at the photos of the ledgers I had taken, his weathered face hardening into a mask of professional concern as he sipped his black coffee. I told him about the silicone and the fake provider ID, my voice cracking on the word son. Marcus didn't offer empty platitudes or false comfort. He simply opened his laptop and began digging into the dark corners I couldn't reach alone. Marcus's fingers flew across the keys, bypassing the surface-level lies Leo had carefully constructed to keep me blinded by my own maternal hope. Within 20 minutes, he uncovered a network of private messaging threads between Leo and a consultant, specializing in what they called legacy protection services. This wasn't just a husband and wife keeping a secret. It was a coordinated effort involving a third party who provided the forged medical documents. The conspiracy stretched far beyond the walls of their guest suite, involving sophisticated digital masking to ensure the ultrasound videos looked authentic. My son hadn't just made a mistake. He had hired professionals to help him rob me of my sanity and my late husband's hard-earned estate. We traced the origin of the 4D ultrasound photos Chloe had tearfully shared at her baby shower last month to a specific IP address in Eastern Europe. The boutique clinic Chloe claimed to visit was actually a front for a dark website that sells customized fake medical documentation for insurance fraud. Marcus pointed out a recurring digital watermark on the corner of the image, one invisible to the naked eye but glaring under his forensic software. It proved that the heartbeat I thought I saw was a looped video file purchased for $49. The depth of their commitment to this charade was chilling, suggesting they were prepared to maintain this elaborate performance until the very moment of a staged tragedy. The investigation took a darker turn when Marcus accessed Leo's personal credit report and uncovered $200,000 in high-interest debt to private lenders. These weren't banks. They were predatory firms known for using aggressive physical tactics to collect on their investments when payments were missed. I realized then that Leo wasn't just greedy. He was desperate, drowning in a sea of bad decisions and using my estate as his only life raft. He hadn't just lied to get a bigger inheritance. He was actively siphoning my life savings to pay off people who didn't take no for an answer. The baby was never a grandson to him. It was a financial instrument designed to keep the wolves from his door. The most devastating blow came when Marcus found a digital draft of a loan application where Leo had listed my family estate as collateral. He had forged my signature on a preliminary power of attorney document, dated just 2 weeks after Robert's funeral when I was most vulnerable. He was planning to take control of Vance Interior Landscapes entirely, using the stress of the new baby as a reason for me to step down. Every hug he gave me, every time he called me grandma, was a calculated move to ensure I felt comfortable enough to sign my life away. I wasn't just losing a grandchild. I was watching my own son prepare to bury me alive for a profit. My world was collapsing, but I knew I couldn't confront them until I found the final piece of this poisoned puzzle. Marcus looked at me, his eyes reflecting the cold reality of the situation, and asked if I wanted him to call the authorities immediately. I hesitated, my mind racing through the implications of sending my only child to prison, even as the weight of his betrayal crushed my soul. I just found the receipts for the fake doctor and the forged power of attorney. If you were me, would you confront them right now, or keep digging to see how deep this hole actually goes? Type confront or dig in the comments below. I need your strength to decide my next move. Marcus tracked the digital breadcrumbs to a physical suite in the Kensington Financial District, a place that smelled of stale coffee and expensive toner. The door for Legacy Protection Services wasn't a law firm, but a specialized agency for high-net-worth deception. We found a discarded ledger in the hallway bin that listed Leo's name alongside 3 other prominent families in our social circle. This wasn't an isolated, desperate act by a struggling son. It was a subscription-based fraud ring designed to harvest inheritances from grieving parents. My hands shook as I realized the woman I'd had tea with last Tuesday was likely a victim of the exact same calculated, cold-blooded parasitic operation. The specialist Chloe claimed was treating her, a Dr. Silas Vane, turned out to be a disgraced former anesthesiologist who lost his license in 2018 for prescription forgery. Marcus found a secure messaging app on a burner phone Leo left in his gym bag, revealing daily coordination between my son and this criminal. Vane wasn't just providing forged papers, he was coaching Chloe on how to simulate Braxton Hicks contractions and which prenatal vitamins to leave prominently on the nightstand. They were refining the performance every single night while I sat downstairs, knitting tiny wool sweaters and praying for a future that was being systematically dismantled by a man with a medical degree and no soul. The financial rot went deeper than the $5,000 monthly transfers I thought were for medical care. Marcus uncovered a secondary siphon, a series of automated payments totaling nearly $90,000, disguised as environmental maintenance fees for my nursery business. Leo had used his administrative access to create a ghost vendor, effectively forcing my own company to fund his gambling debts and Chloe's designer maternity wardrobe. Every time I looked at my profit margins and felt a sense of pride in our growth, I was actually staring at the evidence of my son's theft. He didn't just want my future. He was actively cannibalizing my life's work while I smiled at him over Sunday dinner. The most chilling discovery was the involvement of my own personal assistant, Sarah, who had been with Vance Interior Landscapes for 7 years. Marcus found encrypted emails showing Sarah had been feeding Leo my private calendar and medical records since Robert's funeral. She knew exactly when my grief was at its sharpest, alerting Leo to call with baby updates whenever I spent too long in the garden alone. I had trusted her with the keys to my home and my heart, yet she was an architect in this theater of cruelty. My sanctuary had been bugged by the people I loved most, turning my private mourning into a strategic vulnerability for their financial gain. The risk shifted from financial to terrifyingly personal when Marcus found a hidden GPS tracker tucked inside the wheel well of my Lexus. Leo wasn't just lying. He was hunting me, monitoring my movements to ensure I didn't visit Dr. Eris or Marcus's office without his knowledge. A cold sweat broke across my neck as I realized the random phone call I received earlier was a check to see if I was actually at the garden center. My own son was treating me like a high-value target in a sting operation, waiting for the perfect moment to neutralize my suspicion. I was no longer a mother. I was a loose end in a $1 million fraud. Deep within the consultant's cloud storage, Marcus found a scanned document from a municipal hospital dated exactly 4 months ago. It was a discharge summary for Chloe Vance following a confirmed miscarriage at 12 weeks. The cold, clinical text described the loss of the grandson I had already named in my heart, the one Robert would have loved. Leo hadn't just continued a lie. He had taken his wife's genuine trauma and turned it into a profitable performance. He saw her blood, and her tears not as a tragedy to be mourned, but as a strategic pivot to keep the inheritance flowing. This was the ultimate betrayal of both the living and the dead. My phone buzzed with an unknown number, and a voice like gravel through a silk cloth warned me to stop digging into family matters for my own safety. The caller knew about the gardening gloves on the potting bench and the exact time I locked the greenhouse at night. It wasn't Leo's voice, but someone hired to keep the legacy protection secrets buried deep in the soil. The walls of my beautiful, meticulously landscaped estate suddenly felt like the bars of a very expensive cage. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting for my money. I was fighting for the right to breathe without looking over my shoulder at my own child. The final document Marcus unencrypted was a draft for a petition for involuntary guardianship, naming Leo as the sole executor of my affairs. He had gathered evidence of my supposed mental decline, citing my obsession with the baby and my erratic spending on the nursery as signs of late-onset dementia. He was preparing to strip me of my legal personhood, using the very joy he had manufactured as a weapon to prove I was unfit. If I didn't stop him now, I would spend the rest of my life in a high-end facility, drugged into silence while he liquidated the business Robert and I built with our bare, blistered hands. I sat in the darkness of Marcus's office, staring at the mountain of evidence that proved my son was a monster I had helped create. The air felt thin, and the scent of that cold silicone gel seemed to cling to my clothes, a permanent reminder of the fake life they tried to sell me. I am about to show you the footage from the hidden camera I installed in the nursery tonight, but I must warn you first. What you are about to see is deeply disturbing and may change how you view your own family forever. If you are not prepared for this level of darkness, please turn off the video now. This is your only warning. Marcus Thorne handed me a single laminated sheet of paper that felt heavier than the mountain of debt Leo had accumulated. It was a formal discharge summary from a municipal hospital dated exactly 4 months ago, detailing a spontaneous abortion at 12 weeks for Chloe Vance. My vision blurred as the words, "fetal demise," burned into my retinas, turning the world into a flickering gray static. My knees buckled, and I had to grip the edge of the mahogany desk until the wood bit into my palms. The grandson I had named, the one I had already written 12 letters to in my journal, had been gone for a season I didn't even know existed. The true horror wasn't the fake belly or the stolen thousands. It was the realization that my own son was the choreographer of this grief. Marcus played an audio file recovered from a deleted cloud backup, and Leo's voice filled the room, cold and transactional as a ledger. He wasn't comforting a grieving wife. He was instructing Chloe to tighten the strap and cry harder, because my checkbook only opened when she looked miserable. My chest felt like it was being crushed by an invisible hydraulic press, each breath a jagged shard of glass cutting through my lungs. He had taken his wife's genuine trauma and weaponized it against my maternal hope for a profit. I remembered the gender reveal party 3 months ago, specifically the moment Chloe burst into tears when the blue confetti exploded into the air. I had held her, whispering that Robert would have been so proud, never realizing her sobbing was the sound of a woman drowning in a lie her husband forced her to tell. I recalled the way she flinched whenever my hand strayed near her stomach during our weekly nursery updates, a gesture I'd mistaken for maternal modesty. My love for Leo fought with a primal, predatory rage that made my fingertips throb with a rhythmic ache. The son I raised had died long before the grandson I never met. Mourning a ghost has ended. The architect of this misery must now face the foundation he destroyed. I wiped the salt from my cheeks and felt my spine harden into a pillar of cold, uncompromising iron that Robert would have recognized. I am no longer a grieving widow or a hopeful grandmother. I am the woman who built an empire, and I am coming to tear his playhouse down. I am standing outside their front door now, the silicone prosthetic heavy in my left hand, and the truth screaming in my right. Before I turn this handle and end his charade forever, Are you still here with me? Type I am here to witness the reckoning. I invited Leo and Chloe to the estate under the guise of signing the final trust fund papers, a celebration I staged in the presence of Dr. Aris and Marcus Thorne. The mahogany table was set with the family silver, but the atmosphere remained as cold as a morgue. When they arrived, Chloe was glowing in a new emerald silk dress, her hand resting on that fraudulent silicone mound with practiced, maternal grace. I didn't offer champagne. I simply placed the leather-bound journal I'd written for the baby in the center of the table. I looked my son in the eye and asked him one final time if there was anything he needed to tell me before the lawyers finalized the $500,000 transfer. Leo smiled his predator's smile, but Marcus stepped forward, slamming the forensic audit of the environmental maintenance fees onto the lace tablecloth. The room went silent as I reached into a velvet bag and pulled out the gray, industrial-grade silicone prosthetic, throwing it onto the table where it landed with a sickening synthetic thud. Dr. Aris stood up, his voice a gavel of absolute medical authority, as he detailed the forged discharge papers and the $49 loop of a heartbeat they bought online. Chloe's face drained of color, turning a translucent, ghostly white, as she realized the witnesses in the room weren't guests, but the architects of her absolute public exposure and ruin. This is a misunderstanding, Mother. You're clearly suffering from another one of your episodes. Leo spat, his voice trembling with a desperate, failing gaslight. He tried to grab Chloe's arm to flee, but Marcus blocked the exit, his hand resting firmly on the file containing the forged power of attorney documents. Chloe collapsed into a chair, wailing about the stress of the miscarriage, trying to weaponize her past trauma one last time to garner my pity. She begged me to remember the Vance legacy, her tears flowing over the very table where Robert used to teach Leo about the honesty of the soil. Their manipulation was a dying animal, thrashing in a trap they had built with their own greed. Then, the mask finally shattered as Leo lunged toward the audit papers, his voice erupting in a jagged, hateful scream that echoed through the hallways of my home. You were never going to give me that money, you selfish old woman. You only cared about a dead man and a ghost. He confessed everything in a torrent of bile, the $200,000 gambling debt, the shell companies, and how he coached Chloe to fake the contractions to keep the inheritance ATM open. He admitted that the baby was nothing more than a financial instrument to pay off the predators at his heels. The confession was a suicide of character, recorded in full by the security cameras Marcus had installed earlier that morning. The front doors opened, and 4 uniformed officers entered the dining room, the metallic jingle of handcuffs cutting through Leo's frantic, incoherent shouting. Marcus stepped aside as they read Leo and Chloe their Miranda rights, the words grand larceny and aggravated fraud hanging in the air like a thick, suffocating smoke. I watched as they were pressed against the very walls I had decorated with images of our family's supposed honor and lasting legacy. Chloe's linen dress was stained with spilled wine as she was led out in tears, her status-obsessed world collapsing into the back of a cold, black-and-white cruiser. My son didn't look back. He only stared at the floor, a defeated, empty shell. The justice was swift and surgical, leaving no room for the expensive lawyers Leo hoped would save him from the consequences of his betrayal. They were sentenced to 8 years in a state penitentiary, with a court order to liquidate every asset to repay the $340,000 they siphoned from my business. Sarah, my assistant, had her professional certifications permanently revoked and faces 5 years for her role in the conspiracy. I stood on the porch, watching the blue lights fade into the distance, knowing the Vance name was finally clean, even if the branch was now bare. I took Robert's gardening gloves and began the long process of uprooting the rot they left behind in my soul. It has been exactly 8 months since the gavel fell, and the silence in my greenhouse no longer feels like a heavy shroud of mourning, but like fertile soil waiting for a new season. I have converted the guest suite into the headquarters for the Vance Legacy Foundation, providing grants to women who suffered through the isolating trauma of genuine miscarriage without family support. Every morning I put on Robert's leather gardening gloves. Though the cedar scent is fading, I feel his presence in the resilience of the new lilies blooming near the porch. My son's room is empty, a clean slate of polished wood, representing a branch I pruned to save the tree from total rot. I am looking at you now because your intuition is the only inheritance that cannot be stolen or forged. I let my hunger for a legacy blind me to the mathematical impossibilities of their lies, and I almost paid with my very soul. Remember that while we are told to honor our parents, the scripture also promises that the truth shall set you free, and freedom often requires a painful, surgical honesty. Do not let legacy protection become a cage for your common sense. If you have ever cut a poisonous branch from your own life, please type justice below, share this warning, and subscribe. This story was a dramatization of real events. Some names and details were changed,